My my sister, that she is already here in Hyderabad. My sister, she's suffering a lot for the hot weather in India. So I told her, okay, you came in the exactly time where India is better, because the hot weather is very, very, very hard, no?
Yeah. Maybe you can buy yourself an air conditioner.
I have an air conditioner, sir. Fortunately, I had one.
Right.
But I need to balance the use, because the bill is high. So
Run it at 25 degrees
yes,
temperature. That
yes,
is optimal.
I do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Whoever 1 plus nord n 10 5G is finding it difficult to connect to the audio. Is that Mr. Handino? Kavya?
Sir?
Old student?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I have another Kavya. So I was wondering which Kavya this is.
PG college, sir.
Yeah. That is what I thought. Thank you. Thank you for coming, despite my not intimating you separately. I really didn't know that you would be interested. Otherwise, I would have intimated you. My apologies for that, Kavya. So what, shall we start off?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. I had told Maria that we shall not go around beating the proverbial bush, and we'll get to research methodologies straight. But before I can do that, I have to ensure that you remember what we had done. And I really have to thank each and every one of you for your unlimited patience with me. And it's been on, off, on, off. And I'm really sorry about that. But it was not in my hands. It was just simply not in my hands. I had even been hospitalized again, and so those kind of things. So I'm not doing a great job of my life. But I thought, even now I'm not fully fit. But I didn't want to shirk the responsibility. This is my responsibility, especially after I have acknowledged it as my responsibility and started teaching this. It is really my responsibility. But before I get on with the research methodology thing, if you read what I put on, now please look for the link on the other community. There are two communities now, one which is just social sciences taught in, which has the face of Socrates. And then you have this other community, which has got a mic for some strange reason. I think that's a more appropriate thing, because all I do is talk, and talk. And the best way to stop me from doing that is by raising your own points, your own questions. And so what I had put on that particular page, I hope you've read it. I have said that while the primary focus is on, uh, while the primary focus is on, what should I say? It is on research methodology. Since most of you are also pursuing your, what should I say, your pursuing your PhDs or some form of research, I'm sure you have various subjects, and without uh, being politically correct, let me just say that you have supervisors who cannot uh, really help you with your ideation process or the writing process itself, which is much more difficult than we actually think it is. So please feel free to raise questions of how to do what. Or if you want to challenge some of the things that I say here, that also is absolutely welcome. But when I say I can help you with the process of, I can help you with the process of your ideation, it's not to say that I have, I'm the repository of all knowledge. One of my teachers, when I questioned him once, he was so offended that he said, I am an ocean of knowledge, and how dare you question me like this? So I don't think I'm, leave alone an ocean, I am not even a drop of knowledge. But what I do know and where I can help you is in telling you how to look for your data, how to organize it, and how to start putting it down in a cogent form for yourself so that you can write that. By data, I don't necessarily mean fieldwork data. It's your whatever work that you're, even if it is secondary research from secondary sources, that itself is something that I can help you with. Meaning, I can tell you how to go around, how to go around, what should I say? Organizing your thoughts first, how to draw a chart in your own mind, and how you can present that organized data in an organized form, which will give cogency to what you're writing. and it'll reduce the possibilities of misunderstandings by a big degree. Okay, so that is what I want to do. And it is not just about writing a thesis or writing a research paper. It is also about writing anything. Even if you're answering a question in an exam, you just can't do it arbitrarily. There is a method to it. You have to essentially first organize your understanding the proposition that is being presented to you, and then you should be able to organize your thoughts around that proposition, put it down in some kind of order, and then present it, either in the form of an answer or whatever that is required. And it is very unfortunate that we live in the age of MCQs, because as it is, writing has become a very big victim of all kinds of, made easy methodologies that are available in the market. Okay. No shortcut will give you knowledge. Please remember that. And there's no substitute to knowledge. Shortcuts are just shortcuts. And it's just a lottery if through the use of a shortcut, you can actually crack something. But otherwise, mostly anybody who uses shortcuts are not those people who can succeed in what they're doing. So this MCQ thing is a very unfortunate thing. But I would still say that it doesn't end with you getting a job by using MCQs. Once you do get a job, you have to write. And government jobs are not going to be easy to come by. This time, because it is elections, in a few months, KCR has announced so many jobs. Otherwise, there will be no jobs from the government. So you will have to look at the private sector, where you do find extremely good jobs these days. But one of the very important necessities, not important, one of the most required, unavoidable necessities is your ability to articulate your ideas both in spoken word and in written word. So I therefore ask you not to just listen to me as if I'm some kind of a spiritual guru who's sitting and faffing away. No, I'm not a spiritual guru of any type. I'm not a guru of any type. Like I said, I only know very little. I'm sharing what little I know with you. So please remember this, and if you feel that you disagree with something that I'm saying, feel very free to challenge me. I'll be extremely happy if you challenge me. Otherwise, I might end up thinking that I'm this great, to quote my old teacher, ocean of knowledge which cannot be questioned. I don't want to become that. Okay. All right. So to get back to research methodology, just let me quickly run through what we were doing before we went in and out of these breaks, and I am hoping and praying that I will be in. I'm crippled, there's no doubt about that, but I am praying that I'll be in some position to at least take these online classes on a regular basis and do something productive. So that is what my prayer is. And thank you very much for coming. And despite my playing on and off, so I hope that will not happen. And my apologies for what has happened so far, but it is not under my control. But let's hope there'll be some mercy from the force above. So I had actually started off by talking to you people about this whole idea of research. And I said that in the beginning, there was no research. There was only this thing called search. Okay, I was trying to make a difference between search and research because I was trying to tell you research would mean search again, which means that you're looking into something that has already been searched and presented. Searched and presented. So if that has been done, and if you are looking for clarity or if you're looking for a better understanding or you're looking at that whatever has been presented in order to find something that you don't agree with, that becomes research. But if you imagine the earliest people in the world, when we talk about the ancient Indians, for example, the ancient uh, Greeks, their question was a very, very ontological one, which is where are we coming from? Who are we? And it only turns epistemological later when they start attempting answers to these questions about what the world is. And I think I told you that a very, very famous example that you find between in an argument between Heraclitus and Parmenides. Heraclitus believed that everything in the world moved. So he said, you can't step into the same river twice. I hope you remember this. And Parmenides argued with him and said, no, you don't step into the same river twice. You can step into the same river infinite number of times. If that river is not the same, then it still wouldn't be there. So the idea that Parmenides had is that in a world that is ordered in perfection, there is no necessity for movement. And this basically is what became the basis of Plato's thinking when he said the ideal is real. Okay, so the ideal world doesn't move. There's no movement in that. It doesn't need to move. It's imperfection that needs to move for Plato, not Parmenides. So you see, that is the search. That is absolutely the search. But the real research begins with biblical hermeneutics. I discussed this with you, this particular concept. Does anyone remember if I discussed biblical hermeneutics?
Sir, I think that you stopped in this topic the last classes. We,
Was discussed.
in this point of the discourse, the biblical.
Uh-huh.
You
Okay.
stop. I mean, you stop in the last class in this topic. This topic.
Biblical hermeneutics.
Yes. Yes.
So let me pick it up there and quickly run through how biblical hermeneutics can be understood to be the real beginning of uh, uh, how we can understand that to be the beginning of what should I say, the beginning of research. Now, what was happening with Christianity is that if you look at the Bible, and I'll go through this story very, very quickly. If you look at the Bible has been a subject of controversy among the early Christians because some of the earliest versions of the Bible are actually very raunchy. They're very, very raunchy. And there is explicit discussion, sexuality in that, but in the aftermath of the fall of the Roman Church, in the aftermath of the Reformation, the real attempt to modify Christianity happened. Okay, that is when they changed the statues in Rome by chopping off the penis of a number of people, the statues, and also by removing any reference whatsoever to anything which even remotely connoted anything sexual. Okay, so that is what happened during the Reformation, in the aftermath of the Renaissance, actually. But the early things were that even among the scholars, again, a very Christian word, which today is in social sciences, any science for that matter, say anybody who's very well educated, you say is has good scholarship, or you say is a very scholarly person. So scholar comes from scholastic, and scholastic was a designation given to people who were searching for what could be the real Bible, because many different versions of the Bible started appearing in the early Christian period itself, and even in the late Roman period. And you will see that you will find that you have institutions like the university. The university is a Christian institution in its inception. It's Christian because of the fact that it is Christianity which believed in the oneness of the universe, and that everything in the universe being purposive, nothing random happens in the universe, everything happens for a reason. So you people attending this class has a reason. You might not know the reason, but there is a reason. Is what purposiveness will tell you, which is against the idea of things happen randomly. They happen accidentally. So that would be called a multiverse. Okay, many verses, not one verse. But the Christians, like all the old civilizations, were of the belief that there was a oneness to this universe. In fact, they said that all believers around you is born out of the oneness which is the universe. And all manyness can be reduced to this oneness, and it returns back, manyness returns back to the oneness. So you see, so the universe and university were words that were, especially the university, was a Christian word and a Christian description of an institution. And if you look at, you say seminars, and our department had a 3-day international seminar, which I studiously avoided because of the fact that I really didn't, which I studiously avoided. One, because I wasn't healthy enough to go through that for one whole day. And the other reason being that it was something international, and it drew scholars from across various colleges of Osmania University. I didn't know Hyderabad was international, and drawing people from various colleges of Hyderabad and the Mufassal areas became international. I mean, I knew that it would do that in the end. So I didn't. That is not the kind of international universe that we are talking about. That's not the kind of university that we are talking about. That is not the kind of seminar. The seminar comes from seminary, where a number of people, essentially, should I say, where a number of people sorry for that, where a number of people basically, came from various types of study of the Bible and its different iterations. And if you look at that, you will find that a seminary was a collection not only of the different versions of the Bible, but also of people's perceptions regarding those different versions, a collection of written down perceptions of people. Okay, so people were studying them, comparing them with the intention of establishing which of the many versions is actually perhaps the most accurate and had veracity or truth in it. So that is what a seminary was. So people presented papers, not empty papers. They presented various different papers. And these papers, you see today, when you're doing research, you're asked to footnote. If you make a claim that Hegel said so and so thing, in a certain book of his, then you have to give a notation there, and then you have to tell which book of Hegel, which edition of that book, who is the publisher of the book, which year of publication, place of publication, and the page number of that particular thing that you have taken from. So why this whole thing, notations, which became footnotes, but footnotes, the meaning of it also changed a little, but this is the, I'll go into that later when we start talking about methodology. But the original footnote was providing proof of where you got your argument from and how you are using that in order to say something is right or wrong. Okay, so you also had to provide the context, because one thing about a text, you can very selectively read it. You can have a preconceived idea and read a text selectively and present that text in that preconceived form. Okay, suppose I have a preconceived idea that Indian democracy is not a democracy. Let's say I have this idea. I can go through a number of different works and say, see, according to this, there is no democracy, or according to this democracy is lumpen. So you can talk about that, but if you produce the context, that is why the year, the place of publication, and if it is a translation, you'll also have to say, provide the name of the translator, the editor. You'll have to provide all those details so that one can check the veracity of what you're saying. Okay, so that is how biblical hermeneutics came into being. Now, what is hermeneutics? When you put it in straightforward English, hermeneutics is something which becomes nothing but, what should I say? It becomes interpretation in English, but that is an insufficient word. It is an absolutely insufficient word to talk about what the true meaning of hermeneutics is, not just interpretation. Now you see, let's try to understand the origin of the word hermeneutics. Hermeneutics came from the Greek name Hermes. Hermes, apparently, I don't know how apodictic this particular story is. Hermes was supposed to be a messenger who was carrying a message given to him to deliver it to somebody else. But since there was still no great writing in those days, it was orally conveyed. So Hermes had to depend on his memory and accurately convey that particular message to whomever he was supposed to deliver it to. So in this particular process, Hermes sometimes made few errors. So if something seemed contradictory, then which was the true version? That is what becomes the most important question. to answer which is the true version. So if we have to understand the true version, then you'll have to research. So the Greeks invented the term hermeneutics, basically to say that you have to look for the correct interpretation of messages. Similarly, if there is a text and that text is written by some author in the past, how do you interpret it? Okay, so let me give you a very simple example from political science. I hope it's okay with everyone if I give an example. It's quite a simple example. I'll give you this example from Hobbes. Now, Hobbes in his Leviathan talks about a state of nature. Okay, and he says the state of nature is a war of all against all. Sorry, time for some meditation. Very sorry about this, but it has to be done. And so he says it's a war of all against all, which means that there is no society. That is the intention of Hobbes saying that the state of nature, people living in nature, did not have a society. So he then goes on to say, because it is a state of war of all against all, life in the state of nature is solitary, nasty, brutish, and short. Okay? Solitary, brutish, nasty, and short. So he says people realize that this is not for their good. This is not for their good. And he talks about two propinquities or two drives, basically, which govern human behavior. And he says one drive is appetite, which is a movement towards something you like. Appetite. You say, I don't have the appetite for something like that. Appetite is not necessarily only food or the necessity to consumption for the consumption of food. That is not just the only thing. Okay, you can also look at appetite in other forms. But I have no appetite for violent films. Okay, and the opposite of appetite is aversion. So no appetite can also mean that you have an aversion for something. So what do we have an appetite for? And what do we have an aversion for? According to Hobbes, we have an aversion for anything that causes pain and suffering. Okay? And our appetite is for self-preservation, which he calls rational self-preservation. And this rational self-preservation is what makes people enter into a social contract to come out of the state of nature, to come out of the state of nature and to live sociably in the rule of a sovereign of the state. The state is, one very interesting thing about observation, one interesting observation about Hobbes's social contract is that in his social contract, it is first the state that comes into being, and because there is a state that brings in law and order and a sovereign or a supreme power, that is what will set up a society. So, in no other philosopher do you find this kind of an argument where the state precedes society. Everywhere, society precedes the state, and that only in the modern period, the state. So, if you are looking at this, so he says people get into a social contract to come out of that nasty, horrible state of nature. Now, one of the commentators, George Sabine, a liberal intellectual himself, he raised a point in his history of Western political theory. When he talks about Hobbes, he raised a point where he says Hobbes is irrational. He's trying to fool the readers of the Leviathan. Why does Sabine say this? He says this simply because of the fact, he says that if there is an urge for rational self-preservation, instinctively, then why is man living in a state of war of all against all? Why is he there in the first place? And if it is not an instinctive rational self-preservation, how does he suddenly get this instinct of rational self-preservation and decide to enter into a social contract? So he says the Hobbesian idea of a state of nature transforming into a state and society is complete nonsense. Irrational is what he calls. Now, if you give a thought to the very idea, how many of us will actually believe that, Hobbes would be a philosopher of consequence if he was so stupid or irrational? Why would people be studying him still? Now, this is where you can use hermeneutics. Has Sabine studied Hobbes properly? Okay, this is the question C.B. Macpherson raises. Has Hobbes been studied properly? So you have a question being raised. Is a philosophical work to be treated as a complete product in itself? Okay? Is it to be treated as a complete product in itself? By that, what do we mean? It means that a text contains all the information that is required for us to make proper sense of it. Does it contain all the information that is required of it? Okay? Now, that is what people believed earlier. Even today, when we read a novel, we think that whatever is there to be known is there in the novel. Okay, if you're reading horrible writers like Nick Carter or James Hadley Chase or somebody like that, then you might want to believe that, you know, it is a complete product. You read it, it's meaningless, it's endless. It's pointless. You read it for pleasure or you read it to pass time and you throw it away. But a philosophical tract, can you just read it as something passing time for pleasure and throw it away? You can't. You would like to investigate it. So how would you want to investigate? So people like Vico would say that history is of the most importance here. So when you study a text, it's not sufficient to study just a text. You have to study the context in which the text has been written. So this whole method of interpretation called text in context came into being. Okay? So what is the context? The context is the history of the time in which the author lived and wrote a particular work. Now, please look at Hobbesian times, the England of Hobbesian times. If you look at it, you will find that it is a time of all kinds of wars, civil wars, wars with France. Okay, so, and this was happening despite the fact that there was a king, some kind of authority. So Hobbes is asking himself this question. If people behave like this in the presence of authority, how would they behave if there is no such thing called authority? So he used a method which is called the method of logical abstraction. What is a method of logical abstraction? A method of logical abstraction basically means that, all right, there are 5 elements to something that I'm saying. Okay? Or let's say there are 3 elements to something that I'm saying. There is authority, there are people, and there is violence. Now, if authority is there and people are behaving like this, how will it be if I experimentally remove authority from the situation? Remove authority from the situation. So you have logically abstracted, or in this case, if you want, subtracted or removed the variable called authority. And you have come to the conclusion that without authority, it will be a war of all against all. Then comes the second part, reintroduction. Well, people are behaving like this. despite the fact that there is authority. So how would they, I mean, what point is it if we consider things like there being no authority and this is how people will behave? People are behaving even in the presence of authority like there is no authority. So what does that mean? It means there is something wrong with the nature of authority. There is something wrong with the nature of authority. So what do you need to do? You need to redefine what authority is and how it operates. So if you're going to do that, then question is this: what is the social contract that Hobbes is creating? A social contract that first creates the state and the sovereign. Sovereign, like I said, is the supreme power. Now, what kind of supreme power is this? Or if you like, call it supreme authority. What kind of authority is this? This supreme sovereign is somebody who will ask you to surrender all your rights. All your rights. You will ask people to surrender to the sovereign, which means you create a society in this particular state where the sovereign has taken away all your rights. Now, what do you get in return for that? In return for that, you get a society that is peaceful, a society that is no conflict, that has no conflict, a society where people are living commodiously. Why? Because they have no rights. They can't operationalize any of their rights. So, what Hobbes found to be the main problem with the kind of authority that existed in the England of his own times was an authority that allowed you to have rights. Natural rights, as he calls them. Rights derived from nature. So that is why the state of nature is a war of all against all, because that's where you have all the rights. Please differentiate between natural laws and natural rights. Hobbes is not talking about or talking against natural laws. In fact, when he talks about social laws, he says social laws are not repugnant to natural laws. Not repugnant meaning there is no contradiction between natural laws and social laws. But rights is a different proposition altogether. As long as you retain your right and take something as mine rightfully, as you take something as mine rightfully, then what you're doing is you're asserting that this is something that is my entitlement. So the other person also will say, I too have this right. So I too have this entitlement. And that's what brings you into conflict with each other. Because everybody is asserting their natural rights and coming into conflict. So by surrendering the rights, the variable that is the cause of conflict, by surrendering that to the supreme authority, Leviathan, huge. The sovereign is no ordinary sovereign, bigger than me also. I thought I was very big, but when I read Hobbes, he has this thing with, I like Hobbes because he likes things which are big. His books are called Behemoth, something which is big, Leviathan, something which is huge. I'm huge and big, so I think Hobbes would have liked me. But that apart, Hobbes is basically saying that you will be guaranteed a peaceful existence, a long life, if you surrender your rights to the sovereign. And there is no limit to the power of the sovereign. That is why the sovereign is a Leviathan. People will tell you the Leviathan is a person. No, Hobbes doesn't define the Leviathan or the sovereign either as a person or as an institution, doesn't define it. It could be anything, I guess. So, he's not an idiot. He is looking at a way of establishing peace and tranquility by having only one source of authority. If you look at the England of his time, there are several sources of authority. The church is one source. The king is one source. The feudal lords are one source. So all these people are different sources of authority. And the church and the king didn't agree with each other. The king felt he was the real power. The church said, no, you are not the real power. We are the real power. So that's how the whole tumult of society began. And therefore, it is not at all in any sense inconceivable that every section of society burnt the Leviathan, and to preserve his own life, Hobbes had to run away from England to France and travel with the Cavendish family. I'm sure 16th and 17th century England. Yes, Manoharini, whatever. Thank you, ma'am. I assume it's a she. So if it's a she, thank you, ma'am. And if it is not, thank you, sir. So 16th and 17th century England is the time when you see the whole idea of conflicting authorities being overcome or trying to be overcome by Hobbes. Now, a lot of people have told me there may be n number of justifications like this by taking recourse to what you are calling, the correct method of interpretation or hermeneutics, the correct hermeneutics. But is it possible that people surrender their rights? Let me tell you, she told 16th and 17th century. 17th century, 1688, glorious revolution, which is no revolution at all, okay, which is the Stuart king, James II, abdicating the throne of England and running away because he finds out that the people of England have conspired against him and have invited the King of Scotland with his army to come and help the people of England fight James II. So, fearing execution, he abdicated the throne and ran away. Now, this English are a quirky race. Okay, so once James II went away, they found that they had no king. So if they had no king, then what do? They went in search of a king. And who did they find it? They find this couple in France, William and Mary of Orange. Okay, and they invite them and say, please take over the monarchy. Please take over the monarchy. And we say the people is actually the feudal lords. Common people had no say in any matter like this. Okay, so they invite William and Mary of Orange, and William had a question, a very legitimate one at that, where he said, listen, your people are known for changing kings and dynasties like at your pleasure. What is the guarantee that you won't kick us out or execute us, worse still, if we assume the throne of England? So what guarantee was given? The guarantee that was given was the suspension of all rights, not just natural rights, all kinds of rights, the suspension of that, especially the right to revolt, the right to go against the king. They suspended that and they said, now come and rule. Now that we have suspended the right to revolt, if anybody tries to revolt, we'll execute them. Okay? Now later on, in the next century, this became a subject of huge debate between two friends, one of whom was called, what do we say? One of whom was Edmund Burke, philosopher, and the other one, Thomas Paine, who wrote the seminal work which became the basis of human rights, which the work called The Rights of Man. They were two great friends, but they fell out. Why did they fall out? Because Burke supported the idea that, we should stick to that this thing that we had with the king, the understanding that we had with the king, that we will not exercise our rights. And Thomas Paine asked why. Why should we? So Burke said, but then see, that was the understanding on which the kings decided to rule us. And if we re-invoke our rights, we are going back on our word. Paine's argument was that was for that generation. They can surrender their rights because they have agreed. But who are we to follow what some forefathers of ours have done? We don't have to follow that. And so he wrote an essay called Common Sense, in which he said, how can you surrender something which is not yours? So if you are not born yet, you can't say, when I have a child, I'll surrender his whatever, his property, his rights, because they are not yours. You can't surrender something which is not yours. So that's why he called that essay Common Sense. And he became a champion of rights. And both Burke and Paine had a falling out. So I gave you this example to tell you that Hobbes is not an idiot who gave some solution which can be laughed at, because it was implemented in England. Very much implemented in England for a very long time. So this is hermeneutics. Now you know the context. Put the idea. Later on, the text became ideas in context. Put an idea in its context. You can take an utterance of somebody, like for example, Nivedita Menon, the great scholar, made the stupid mistake of, when she was fighting Anna Hazare's movement, she said patriotism is the last resort of the scoundrel. Now, everybody in India went wild. What do you mean? If you are patriotic, we are scoundrels? How can that be? So much so that Nivedita Menon has never spoken again. But she said something which was stated in a context, which was very, very different from the original context. The original quote that I just gave you, patriotism is the last resort of a scoundrel, was what Samuel Johnson said. And he said that when he found that there were certain, I don't want to get into the whole story, when he found that there were certain people who were using patriotism for anti-social activities. In the name of patriotism, they did anti-social things. So that is why Samuel Johnson said that. That is not the context in which Nivedita Menon said. And rightfully, we also don't know that this was said by Samuel Johnson. We didn't know this. Okay? And so we thought, she's calling us all scoundrels just because we are patriots. We love our country. So therefore, you have to understand that every idea germinates, emanates, germinates, and grows in a context. So you have to look at an idea in context. Hermeneutics, therefore, is one of the early methodologies. One of the early methodologies that came into being in order to find out which perception presented by whom is the right perception and which is not the right perception. It was used in the context of the Bible first, and that's why it was called biblical hermeneutics. Now you will hear a lot of people pronouncing this as hermeneutics. Now, hermeneutics basically is simply the German pronunciation of hermeneutics. So why did this come into being, and why is it so widespread now? It is widespread because the Germans were the first to use hermeneutics in social sciences. And therefore, it's only in the context of social sciences that you'll find people using this particular pronunciation of hermeneutics. But otherwise, it's hermeneutics. And after the biblical hermeneutics, it was applied to literary works, philosophical tracts, like Hobbes' philosophical tracts. So that is how you have a necessity for a method to establish the veracity of one claim against others in the event of there being multiple claims. Thank you very much. Tomorrow, I'll get on with another aspect of methodology, because hermeneutics now no longer actually says it's a scientific methodology. So methodology, in order to be called methodology, nowadays has to be scientific. And what is scientific? That which is empirical. That which can be studied empirically is scientific. So how did this perception come out? We'll start a discussion on that tomorrow and proceed. Thank you very much for your patience and for everything. Tomorrow, 7 o'clock, I hope you'll be back. I hope you have not decided, oh my God, this horrible, unbearable fellow who's shouting as that DP shows on social sciences research. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.